Armenia is holding peacekeeping drills with US forces as tensions rise with neighbouring Azerbaijan over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. For 8 months now, Azerbaijan has blocked a humanitarian passage called the Lachin Corridor. That's the only road that links Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia. Now, 2,000 Russian peacekeepers have failed to keep that corridor open. Russian President Vladimir Putin said there are, quote, no problems with Armenia. But when DW's Yuri Reshetto travelled to the region, he found that Armenia is turning away from Russia and is now looking towards the west.
Borscht and pelmeni. Russian influence can be found on every corner here.
All over Yerevan, the Armenian capital here, there are Russian restaurants and you can often hear the Russian language. And no wonder, Russia has historically been considered a close political ally and friend of Armenia's. But that is changing.
On the streets of Yerevan, you only hear good things about ordinary Russians. Thousands of them live here now. Many came after the war in Ukraine started. Young Russian men fled the country before they could be sent to war. They didn't need a visa to enter Armenia.
We welcomed the people with open arms who fled Putin's regime and who fled the war in Ukraine. We can now distinguish very clearly between the people in Russia and the Russian rulers. Russian rulers are evil. They are evil in a way that harms us and constantly puts us under pressure.
To understand where the change of heart comes from, David Stepanyan takes us to Nagorno-Karabakh, a region that both Armenia and neighbouring Azerbaijan have been fighting over for decades. 3 years ago, this struggle escalated into war. At the time, Yerevan was hoping for military aid from Russia, but nothing came of it. Azerbaijan gained control. The Armenian government has since recognised Azerbaijan's sovereignty over Nagorno-Karabakh, but the ceasefire has been fragile. For 9 months, Azerbaijan has blocked access to the region from the Armenian side via the so-called Lachin Corridor.
Nagorno-Karabakh starts right behind me. We can't go any further. The road is closed. Over there is also when an absolute state of emergency begins.
That is according to eyewitnesses, who also gave us this footage from the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh. Long lines outside stores selling rationed bread, empty shelves in pharmacies and grocery stores. We are told that only ambulances are allowed through. People are cut off from the outside world. Back on the other side, this aid convoy has been waiting to pass since July. Armenians say Russian troops are stationed in the region, but they only watch and allow the blockade to continue. Azerbaijan officials say that is a lie. They say it's possible to enter from Baku on their side. According to them, there is no blockade.
On these pictures, really, I would encourage you really to have a fact-checked approach, because we are living in the area of the fake news and disinformation, unfortunately, and we also unfortunately see a lot of elements of the staged activities.
And how does Russia respond to the accusation it's abandoned Armenia? President Putin claims it's the country's own fault.
What are we supposed to say about it? If Armenia accepts Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, it's not our fault.
For David Stepanyan, Putin's words sound cynical. He's convinced Moscow is deliberately weakening Armenia. Russia's war against Ukraine has only strengthened his belief.
Once we understood what Russia really wants in Ukraine, we knew we had to commit to Ukraine, because they are fighting for all of us today. If Kyiv falls, then a new Soviet Union will emerge. That's what Putin is hoping for.
David Stepanyan believes his country must seek new allies in order to completely detach itself from Russia.
And Yuri Rocheto, who filed that report, joins us now from Riga in Latvia because DW is banned from reporting in Russia. Hi there, Yuri. Now, Armenia's relations with Russia seem to be souring. They're now holding joint military exercises with the US. Can you explain to us why Armenia is seemingly turning its back on Russia?
Well, military exercises between the Armenians and the Americans are actually nothing new. They have been held for years and no one paid much attention to them. But this year everything is different because this year, for the first time, Armenia refused to participate in the other military exercises, namely with Russia, within the framework of the joint military alliance, the so-called collective treaty organization led by Russia. And what's more, Yerevan has even threatened to withdraw from this military alliance with Russia. This means that the military drills with the Americans now are a very clear sign to Russia, a signal, a turning away from Moscow. Why? Because Russia is obviously no longer a protecting power for Armenia, but is rather interested in close cooperation with the Azerbaijanis, who in turn cooperate very closely with Turkey. The Armenians fear exactly that. 3 against 1, Russia, Azerbaijan, Turkey against Armenia. That's why they're obviously looking for a new powerful fourth player.
That came across quite strongly in your report, these Armenian fears that Russia could turn from a protecting power into an aggressor. So how justified are those fears?
Well, I don't think Russia plans to attack Armenia, but at least not now, or not yet. But the political relations between the two countries are really not the best, Anya, at the moment. This despite the fact that both leaders, Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan and Russian President Putin, claim exactly the opposite. But last week, for example, there were a number of remarkable steps taken by the Armenians that greatly angered Moscow. Prime Minister Pashinyan's wife traveled to Ukraine and delivered humanitarian aid to the Ukrainians for the first time. Secondly, Armenia has announced that it will ratify the Rome Statute, according to which Putin could be arrested there. As a reaction to this, the Armenian ambassador was summoned to the foreign ministry in Moscow, where he was protested. Nevertheless, this is, of course, not Russia's war against Armenia, but Moscow is obviously no longer interested in a strong Armenia.
OK. Now, you reported in your piece that Nagorno-Karabakh is blocked off. We now know, though, that there is a corridor to Azerbaijan and that Russia sent aid through that.
Right.
Is that helping people in the enclave? What's the situation?
Right, but so far only one truck has delivered 15 tons of aid. Of course, it helps people in Nagorno-Karabakh, even though it's nothing compared to how much they really need there, seemingly. But the problem is not the quantity, Anya, but the route from where the truck came. It came from Azerbaijan, and that is exactly what the Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh fear. They fear that after the trucks with aid coming through this opened gate from Azerbaijan, more cars will be arriving with the Azerbaijani police, who could take their men and put them in prison in Azerbaijan, because most of men living in Nagorno-Karabakh fought against Azerbaijan in the last 2 wars and could theoretically be treated as criminals. I spoke about this with the refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh in Yerevan. When they heard the news of this road being opened, they became really sad. Although Azerbaijan rejects this fear as unfounded and promised amnesty, this doesn't convince the Armenians.
DW's Yuri Rocheto reporting from Riga. Thanks so much, Yuri.
Well, Vasif Husseinov is from the Center of Analysis of International Relations in Baku in Azerbaijan. I put it to him that Russia appears to have abandoned its support for Armenia, given that its peacekeepers had stood down in the Lachin corridor.
You know, that's the expectation which Armenia apparently expects from the Russian side, to pressure against Azerbaijan and to make its claims fulfilled by the Azerbaijani side. But Russia at the moment does not have that leverage against Azerbaijan to pressure it to open the Lachin Road, which would be in the best interest of Russia as well, because Lachin Road was used by the Russian side as well.
As you understand it, Russia does just not have the heft. It doesn't have the influence in order to over Azerbaijan in order to exert itself in this way, which of itself is quite an admission. Let's move on from that. Armenia has acknowledged Azerbaijan's sovereignty over Nagorno-Karabakh. To the outside world, that looks like a sign that the Armenians are prepared to reach a compromise with the government of Azerbaijan.
Unfortunately, the deeds and words of the Armenian side concerning the recognition of the Karabakh region as part of Azerbaijan do not correspond to each other. Just several days ago, on 2nd of September, the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, sent a congratulatory statement to the separatist regime in Karabakh and congratulated their independence from the Azerbaijani side back in 1991. So that undermined all the achievements that we have already made in the peace process with Armenia, mediated by the West, by the United States and the EU. So on the one hand, they say we recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity with Karabakh part of it. On the other hand, they say, no, it doesn't mean recognition of Karabakh under full sovereignty of Azerbaijan. They basically want de facto independence of Karabakh.
And is that why Azerbaijan is continuing to block this Lakin corridor?
Even today, there have been some Armenians moved from Karabakh region to Armenia via the Lachen Road. It is not blocked. There is limited access, and it is related with the demands of the Azerbaijani side from the local separatist regime in Armenia, in Karabakh, to open the Agdam Road, which would provide shorter access to Karabakh region via the sovereign territories of Azerbaijan, as well as would provide some grounds to open the Lachen Road under the regulations, customs and border regulations of the Azerbaijani government. But
so there's limited access. Just to be clear,
exactly.
There's limited access from Armenia into Nagorno-Karabakh, but a direct access from Azerbaijan. That one-sidedness does not sound like the Azerbaijani government is playing fair, if I can put it that way.
Why we are in this deadlock is related with the fact that after the Second Karabakh War, Armenian side, both the separatist regime in Karabakh as well as the Armenian government, they abused the Lachen Road to transfer military troops to Karabakh as well as to bring in more military equipment. Despite the fact that last year in July, the Armenian government promised to pull out its troops from Karabakh region by September last year. Still, we have around 10,000 Armenian troops on the ground in Karabakh. So they basically abused the Lachen corridor, Lachen Road, and even last year in November, the Azerbaijani government documented around 14 fighters from Iran, which were brought to Karabakh region via Lachen Road. So it posed a massive security threat against Azerbaijan.
Understood.
And it gave no alternative but put some regulations, checkpoint on Lachen Road in order to make sure that the Armenian side wouldn't use it as a security threat against Azerbaijan.
That was Vasif Husseinov from the Center of Analysis of International Relations in Baku.